Hello and welcome to TranquilTrin ASMR. Thank you so much for stopping by today. As you may have seen from the title of this video, today we'll be doing a simple, relaxing coding tutorial. And whether you have experience coding or not, this video is strictly to follow along, relax, and unwind. And for those of you who have coding experience, shout out in the comments below. I'm curious to hear of any projects you might have built or any programming languages you might know. But before we get started, I'll need to put on my blue light glasses. So, for today's tutorial, I'll be building a simple Pokemon game. Pokemon. 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 So, one of my favorite games growing up as a kid was Pokemon, right next to Zelda Ocarina of Time. For those of you who know those games and like those games, shout out in the comments below. Those two games were mostly what I played when I was younger. So I figured for today's tutorial, I would do a Pokemon themed game. So before we begin, grab your favorite sleepy time tea or whatever it is you like to sip on. Okay, let's get started. So for today's project, I'll be using Replit, 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 which is just an environment that you use to write your code in. Replit is free, and you can find it on the internet at replit.com. So, for those of you that are following along, go ahead and pause this video to create an account. I already have one created, so I'm going to go ahead and select New REPL. And for this project, the languages that we're going to be using are HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. So go ahead and select that. And what I'm going to be building is I'm going to be emulating a slot machine that is Pokemon themed. Pokemon, 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 Pokemon. So I'll name this accordingly. Something like Pokemon slot machine, and create it. And as you can see, Replit will start you out with some base HTML code, and to the left you're going to have 3 separate files: an index, a JavaScript file, and a style.css. And over here to the right, you're going to have a white rectangle, and what that is your website. And the cool thing about having this is when you're writing your code, you can run it and refresh it to update your site as you're coding. So let's go ahead and let's get started. I'm going to take out that default hello world, and let's go ahead and change the title. I'm just going to change that to Pokemon Slot Machine. And the title is what shows up here at the tab of your website. And the first thing I'm going to do is add some images to my project. So I'm going to go ahead and create a new folder, And I'm just going to call that IMG. And that's going to be short for images. And for this project, I have some prepared images. So I'm just going to go ahead and drag and drop those. And just a side note, these images I do not own. They're taken from the internet and they're used strictly for education purposes only. And now that we have these images, first thing I'm going to want to do is change the background of my website. That way it's not so blank. And I can do that in my style.css file with the following code. And while I'm at it, I'm also going to write some CSS code to tell my project that the font that I want to use is monospace. Now, let's go ahead and run the project and see where we're at this point. And as you can see, we have our background image. So now let's go to our index.html and write some HTML code to add a title for our game along with some instructions. That way our user knows how to play our game. And to save time, I have some code here that I'm going to copy and paste. And what I'll be using for the title of the game is something called Bootstrap. 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 And basically what that is a library that you can use to stylize your elements on your website. So now that I have the Bootstrap style sheet, I'm just going to go ahead and copy and paste the title and instructions. Now let's go ahead and run this. And as you can see, we have the title of our game, Pokemon Slot Machine. We have instructions, and we have a text field for you to type in the amount that you want to bet. Another thing that we're going to need in addition to this is something to help the user keep track of how much money they have while playing the game. So we're going to need to keep a running total. So let's go ahead and let's do that. And I can do that by just adding a label. And I also want that label to be bold. So I'm going to add a strong tag as well. And I'm basically just going to say something like total credits. Let's run that. And as you can see, we have the total credits there. So now we want to give the user a default amount to start with. So let's go ahead and let's add that. And that number is also going to change while you're playing the game. So I'm going to use a span tag. And I'm also going to give it an ID called credits. And we're also going to bold that as well. And let's give it the default amount of 100. Perfect. So we have that. Now let's go ahead and let's add a button that'll emulate the lever that you pull on a slot machine. And we can do that by adding a button, and let's put that button right after the div tags. And actually, let's put the button in its own div tags. And I'm also going to make a couple classes in my CSS file. One of them is just going to be called center. And all this class is going to do is align my elements. And I'm also going to create a lever, and this I'm going to use to adjust the top margins and padding of my button. Like that. Now I'm going to apply those classes into the div tag where I'm going to nest my button. Now we're going to use the button tags to create the button. And we can just give this button an ID of pull button or something like that. And we're also going to want to make sure that is of type button. And now we're going to use some bootstrap to stylize the button. also want the button to say something. Since the point is to emulate a slot machine lever, we're just going to say pool. Now let's run and see where we're at. And we get a nice red pool button here at the bottom. Now, we're going to have to add a table to our HTML code. And what this table is going to do is it's going to hold 3 different images that are going to populate when you select the pool button. So let's go ahead and let's add that. And I can put that right below the button here. So I'm just going to create table tags, and I'm also going to apply the center class and let's add the table body and add the table data elements, and within the TD tags I'm going to add a span tag because these images will be changing each time you select the pool button. And we're going to give this span tag an ID of image1. And we're also going to apply a class to this, but we got to create the class first. So I'm going to go ahead and go here, and I'm just going to call this class slot image. And what I want to do, or the point of this class, is to change the font size, mainly for the placeholder that I'm going to be using for these images, which is just going to be a hyphen. So a font size of 150 pixels should suffice. And now let's go ahead and apply that. And let's put the hyphen in there as well. And I'm also going to need 2 more of these, so I'm just going to copy and paste. And one more thing. I also want to center the table. So I should be able to do that with the following code. And let's run this. And as you can see, we have our hyphen placeholders here in the center where we're going to populate random images for each pool. So now it's time to write some JavaScript, 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 JavaScript. So let's go ahead and let's do that. First thing I'm going to want to do, I'm going to want to write a function to get a random number. So each time I call this function, it's going to return a random number for me. So we'll just call that get random, and we're going to return the random num variable. And I'm going to set that equal to the math.for method and math.random, and I'm going to multiply that by 3 since we only have, or since we're only randomizing 3 images. Next up, each time the user selects the pool button, I want to run a function that will basically randomize the images and display them on the screen. So I'm just going to call this function pool, and I'm going to write some constants. We can call this number 1, and I'm going to set that equal to the getRandom function, and then I'm going to need 2 more of these, so I'll just copy and paste. And another constant I'm going to create is multiplier, and what this is used for is when the user puts in a bet amount and say they win and they get a match, so the multiplier is going to be used to multiply the bet amount to total out to the user's total winnings for that round. And now the next thing we want to do is write a couple more variables. And basically what I'm doing here, creating a variable called total credits, and what that's doing is it's grabbing the total credits, or the credits ID from our HTML code, and storing it in this variable. So let's go ahead and let's create another one for bet amount. And we can just copy document.getElementById, and this time we're going to be grabbing the bet amount value, that is, and now we want to grab all of the images that I imported and store them in an array. Just like that. And now I'm also going to want to update the total credits. So for example, when the user puts in $10, the total credits should update to $90 if they don't win. So let's go ahead and add the code for that. And that's just going to be total credits subtracted by the bet amount. And I also have a block of code here that I'm going to copy and paste. And basically what this code does is it's going to update the images with random images. So that's all that this complicated code does. And it's storing it in variables. Now, I also need a way for the project to know that if all three images match, then you need to pay out the winnings to the user. So I'm basically just going to say if slot image 1 is equal to slot image 2 and slot image 1 is equal to slot image 3, and then here is where I'm going to create a couple variables. One to store the winnings, and to do that I'm going to take the bet amount and multiply it by the multiplier and then parse it. Then I'll create another variable called new total credits, and then I'm going to parse the total credits and add on the winnings. And now I'm going to want to do one more thing, and that is I want to grab the credits ID again and set it equal to the new total credits, and that will complete the pool function. So the last thing I'm going to want to do is go to my HTML code and I want to apply that function to my pool button. And I can do that by coming here, putting in on click, and adding in the pool function. And that should do it. So let's go ahead and run our project. And I'm going to go ahead and start with $5 and select pool. And as you can see, we get 3 random images as expected, and my total credits has updated correctly. So let's go ahead and let's keep selecting pool and see if we can win. there you go. So since all three images match, that is a win, and my credits were updated accordingly. And of course, I can add different bet amounts. So I can add 3, and I can keep changing my bets. And if I want it to be a little bit riskier, I can go ahead and add a 10 in there. And of course, if you run out of total credits, you can always refresh the page and you're back to 100. And that'll conclude the project. I hope you found it to be relaxing and educational. So thank you so much for stopping by and coding with me, and I'll see you next time.